Is Revelation written in chronological order? Is it to the letter chronologically, or is it possibly concurrent, meaning that things are unfolding or will unfold in a window of time or windows of time? We notice that it is divided into segments or topics. You have the seven churches, and then you have the seven seals, and then you have the seven trumpets, and then you have the seven bowls, and it covers the two witnesses, and it covers 144,000. And some things seem a little bit out of place, and it seems hard to understand. Remember, he didn't have an eraser or a cut and paste option, and he wrote this book that he didn't understand from memory, 22 chapters. Now, I always believed it was chronological, but there's some roadblocks to that theory. And when we think of it concurrently, it's almost like taking a guitar that's out of tune and tuning it. The picture just starts to come together, and so we're going to discuss that today. When you look at the first four seals, the horsemen are riding, they're conquering, they're pillaging, they're plundering, killing with the sword, killing with famine, killing with plague, and turning men against each other to divide and conquer, and just running roughshod over the globe. And as we look at these characters, they have some really cute names like Death and Hades. Clearly, these are not the good guys here. And so when we analyze it, we see the seal is opened, and then the living creature says, "Come and see." And then what we see are crimes against God's creation, against his image, against his people. We know that God is not the author of confusion. We know that he's not willing that anybody should perish. So the seals are not causing these things to happen, but rather it's come and see. And then what we see are the crimes of the beast. So what are the seven seals? Zechariah 5:3 says, "Then he said to me, this scroll contains the curse that is going out over the entire land. One side of the scroll says that those who steal will be banished from the land. The other side says those who swear falsely will be banished from the land." So there's only two sides to the scroll. So here, we can see that the symbolism here, according to the Bible here in Zechariah, is that the scroll is representing a curse. And in this case, there's seven curses. So seven seals on the scroll represent the seven curses. We can see the evidence in the first four seals against the enemy, justifying the curse. This is a picture of the court of heaven. These are being opened by the King of Kings, the only one worthy to open the scroll. This is being sentenced in heaven. It's the judgment, the curse is being proclaimed in the court of heaven. And then the trumpet, we know what a trumpet is. It's an announcement or a call to battle. It rallies the troops. It gets things rolling, musters the troops. And then in Revelation 15:1, it says the bowls, or the vials, are the actual plagues themselves. So when we look at the four horsemen running roughshod over the globe, and then we look in the fifth seal, and we see God's people who have been slain under the altar crying out for justice and crying out for God's vengeance, because vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And this is just more evidence of his crimes, where he is killing and murdering the innocent people, the image of God. And then when we get to the sixth seal, something very interesting happens in the sixth seal. Revelation 6, verse 12, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, that's everybody, hid themselves in the dens and the rocks and the mountains, and said unto the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand? It's interesting. When you look at the first 5 seals, we see the horsemen just running roughshod over the globe, seemingly unopposed. And in the 5th seal, they're crying out for justice. How long till you avenge us, Lord? How long till we see justice, till we see God's hand move in? And now, all of a sudden, they're in complete disarray. What happened? Everyone, we just read I don't think it left anything out, was hiding in the caves. Something happened. The horsemen are not riding anymore. It's interesting, there's 4 horsemen, and then there's 3 woes. The 4 horsemen are the first 4 seals. The 3 woes are the last 3 trumpets. 3 and 4 is 7. It's just another piece of the puzzle. But if there are 7 windows of time, and we can begin to look at this in windows of time, where we see the actions of the enemy listed in the seals, and then we see God's response corresponding in the trumpets and the bowls. It's interesting, they have the first living creature says, come and see, after the first seal is open, and the first angel blows his trumpet, and the first angel pours out his bowl. And the second seal's open, the second living creature says, come and see. The second angel blows his trumpet, the second angel pours out his bowl. It's interesting, but we're going to look at something that Jesus said in Matthew 24. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Matthew 24:29 through 30. It's interesting when we go and look for that, because that event, is quite significant. Jesus spoke about it concerning the end times. It ought to be somewhere in Revelation. So when we go to Revelation, and it's in Revelation 6:12 through 14, we just read it, the 6th seal, and I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth. That is the same event described in Matthew 24, which is also described in Mark 13. The sun became dark, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. Here, the sun became black as sackcloth, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth. I cannot find a better description. And it's written all throughout the Bible in many different places, in Joel and Isaiah and Acts, and here in Revelation. But I cannot find a better description in Revelation than right here in the 6th seal. And what did Jesus say about it? Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. And so it describes the 6th seal as being immediately after the tribulation of those days. So I've just decided, when God says something in his word, and I can just pin it down. So yes, God really said that. It kind of reminds me of, the serpent telling Eve, did God really say? Yes, God really said this. Jesus is the Son of God, and he really did say this right here in Matthew 24, Mark 13. And either it's described here in the 6th seal, or you have to determine that Revelation makes no mention of it, because this is the best fit in Revelation. This is almost exact, with the exception of, it says the moon turns to blood. So we're going to look at what does that mean when the moon turns to blood. Remember, this event is described also in Joel, and in verse Joel 2:31, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord, which is exactly what it said. Then they will see the Son of Man coming. Just exactly the same event. But if you just go back a few verses to verse 10, the sun and the moon shall be dark. So, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. So it gives us a little bit more information. This is talking about the exact same event. And it says the sun and the moon will be dark, and the stars will not only fall from heaven, they will withdraw their shining. Which is interesting, because I've heard, and I used to believe, that this was a lunar eclipse, the blood moon, and it was some sort of a lunar eclipse. But you can still see the stars during a lunar eclipse. I had a picture, I took one a few years ago, and it was 20 degrees when I went outside and stood at 2 o'clock in the morning or some 12 midnight or whatever it was, and looked up and had a picture of the blood moon directly overhead. And you can still see the stars. So it is not a blood moon. This is something different. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because we still, in the end, we still don't know exactly. Is the sun going out? Is this, something that the same thing that happened to Egypt in their time of darkness, but on a global scale? We really don't know. But we do know it's not a lunar eclipse, because you can still see the stars. They don't withdraw their shining during a lunar eclipse. But this is immediately after the tribulation of those days. And so what I've decided is I'm just going to go with what Jesus said on that. And so that is a timeline, a roadblock. I mean, that's a big one, because you either believe that everything else happened after, the seventh seal, all the trumpets and all the bowls were after the tribulation. Or you have to say, did Jesus really say that? Which he did. I don't see another option. But then in chapter 7, it mentions the 144,000. And it just seems totally out of place. And they're sealed before the earth, the grass or the sea is hurt. And yet, the earth has been almost completely demolished in the sixth seal. Just, you go back and read it, and it's like, well, you mean the sea and the grass ain't been hurt? But yet, the beast government, kingdom is hiding in the rocks, crying out to save us from the wrath of the Lamb. They've gone into complete chaos and disarray, and we're just now, after the tribulation, sealing the 144,000. So it seems like a by the way moment, where he, was writing and then wanted to add this before he forgot it. But it does look like he's writing this, from memory, and he doesn't understand it, and this could be an by the way moment. I do know that it's listed in if it's chronological, it happens, according to Jesus, after the tribulation of those days, right there in chapter 7. So either way, this is a major roadblock for the chronological theory. But we're going to look at another possibility and see if this makes any sense. Another roadblock is, if you look at Revelation 3:12, I think it is, where it says that he would make them a pillar, and it's talking about the church of Philadelphia, I believe, and it says he would make them a pillar in the temple of God, and they would never go out. And then you look at Revelation 7, I believe this is right after it talks about the 144,000, and it says that they're before his throne day and night in his temple. And then when you go forward to Revelation 16, and it said no man was allowed, no, it's Revelation 15, it says no man is allowed in the temple until after the 7 plagues or bowls are fulfilled. And it's like, well, did they get thrown out of the temple? It's like, all right, everybody out. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense when you think of it chronologically, that in there before his throne day and night in his temple in chapter 7, and then in chapter 15, no man is allowed in the temple until after the 7 last plagues are fulfilled. But it makes total sense if you're looking at it in windows of time. So we're going to look at it in windows of time. And we can see the crimes of the beast. Listed here, we talked about the first 5 seals. And then the 6th seal, his kingdom is in absolute total chaos, hiding in caves, and fear for their lives because they know that the wrath of God is imminent. And so they've gone into hiding. And then the trumpets and the bowls, we talked about the trumpets and bowls being God's response to the crimes of the enemy. This is the evidence against him, and this is the curse pronounced in heaven. Its announcement and set in motion with the trumpet, and then the bowl is the actual carrying out. And the trumpet sets the table for the bowl or the plague to be fulfilled, accomplished, completed. And when we look, we can see this cause and effect relationship between the trumpets and the bowls. I'm not going to go over it in great detail. You can read it, and right here I've listed just some of the highlights. Hell and fire was cast to the earth. A third of the trees and grass died, and then in the bowls, bowl poured out on the earth, and there was sores on the men. A mountain cast into the sea, and a third of the fish died in the second trumpet, and bowl poured out on the sea, and everything died in the sea. So we can see there has been an intensification where a third of the fish died. Now all of them have died in the sea, a third of the sea where this mountain was cast. And then in the third trumpet, a star fell on a third of the rivers and fountains, and many men died from the bitter water. And the third bowl was poured out on the rivers and fountains, and they're given blood to drink. So we can see this cause and effect relationship continuing on between the trumpets and the bowls, where what is happening in the trumpets is echoed in the bowls and intensified and brought to a completion. And we can see in the fourth trumpet, 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars are smitten, and they did not shine for a third of the day and the night. And then the bowl is poured out on the sun. And then the sun now has this new power where it can scorch men with fire. So there's another intensification. Then in the fifth trumpet, the bottomless pit is opened, and in the fifth bowl is poured out on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness. It's interesting when you look up this word for darkness, and there's a Hebrew word there's several Hebrew words for darkness. This particular word is only used once, and it means to be obscurity, blind, full of darkness. And then when you look at the word that it has as its base, that it's derived from, it's a lesser form of darkness. It's obscure and dark, but not full of darkness, not complete darkness. It reminds me of the meaning of the several different meanings for the word wrath, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then that word is derived from another word, which is a lesser form of darkness. So this is the most severe darkness. This is full of darkness, blindness. It reminds you of what happened to Egypt during their plagues. And this is happening to his kingdom. And his kingdom is full of darkness in the fifth bowl. Does that explain what happens next? Because if you look at it chronologically, you don't see this. You don't make a connection. You don't see anything. But if you're looking at it concurrently, and we're looking at 7 windows of time, since there are 7 is repeated over and over again, we're looking at 7 windows of time with the seals, trumpets, and bowls. This really makes sense because the seals, the first 5 seals, the beast is running roughshod over the globe, and now he's hiding and soiling himself, or his servants are, in the caves, in the 6th seal. What happened to cause that? If you look at it concurrently, you go back to the 5th bowl, and the bowl is poured out on the throne of the beast, the seat of his beast, his power. The bowl is poured out on the power, the seat of the beast. And the next thing we see, looking at it concurrently, is his kingdom is completely in disarray, in chaos, in fear, gripped with fear. That makes total sense looking at it concurrently. And also, his kingdom was full of darkness, and now the sun, the moon, and the stars aren't shining. Just another piece of the puzzle. But when you look at the windows of time, it's like if you look at 2 Peter 3 and 10, and it falls right in this 6th window of time, where it mentions, behold, I come as the thief, in the 2 Peter 3:10, and that is mentioned in the 6th bowl. And it also mentions, or sounds very similar to what's going on in the 6th trumpet and the 6th seal. The same thing with Isaiah 34, 1 through 10. You can see it's going right across this window of time, describing these events. And we talked about that in one of my previous videos. And then if you look at the wrath that we're not appointed to, shows up right in this, across this same window of time. It doesn't show up anywhere in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th windows of time. It is mentioned in the 6th seal, and I believe the 6th bowl, that his wrath has come, that it's imminent, it's arriving, it's on the way. But it actually shows up in the day of his wrath, which is the last day. I've talked about this before. I'm not going to go into great detail, but you can look at John chapter 6, where Jesus taught his disciples. Martha confirmed this, that he taught his disciples that the resurrection of the dead was on the last day. It's 4 times in John chapter 6, and then I think it's John chapter 11 or 12. But anyway, I've covered this before. Jesus says the last day, so I've applied this to my chart. The 7th window of time is the last day. It's in Revelation 10:7, I think it is. It's also in Daniel. It talks about the end of the days. That's the end of the days. When you get to the end of the days, you're at the last day. The last day is the end of the days. And then Jesus, of course, spoke about it as well. And I don't know where Daniel fits in here in this chart. The 1,260 days, if you look at what Jesus said about the 6th seal being immediately after the tribulation of those days, and so the 5th window of time being the end of the tribulation, and you work backwards, then the 1,260 days would go from the end of the 5th seal backwards, and then it's possible, that's why I put a question mark, it's possible that some of Daniel's 1,290 days or 1,335 days could possibly explain that. I don't know. I'm just throwing that over there just, for you to think about and contemplate about, because it says in Daniel that we won't know that till the end of times, and that even then it's sealed till the end of times, and even then only the wise will understand it. So I don't think we'll know that until it happens. just putting that over there is that's the way I see it, given what Jesus has told us about the sixth seal and about the last day. And like I said, the wrath that we're not appointed to, we talked about the darkness, the wrath that we're not appointed to. There's several forms of wrath, and if you look at some of the other forms of wrath, they fill up the cup. There, you see where they were going to throw Jesus off the cliff. They were full of wrath, and Jesus just walked right through them. It was a wrath you could escape from. But it does build, and once it builds and fills up the cup, then you have the wrath that we're not appointed to. So to recap, the first 5 seals are the evidence against the beast, justifying the curse. The trumpets and the bowls are God's response. The 5th bowl is poured out on the throne of the beast, ending his reign of terror, throwing his kingdom in complete and total and utter chaos and fear, and ultimately being lured to their destruction in the final battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat, in the battle of Armageddon. The other option is, of course, that the 144,000 are sealed after the tribulation, if you think of it chronologically. Or you might find yourself questioning, did God really say? You know, God's word is important to us. That's why I think false prophecies are so, you look, they're just all over the place on YouTube, and they're some of the most popular channels, because people want to hear from God, although that's the wrong place to hear, because you're not really hearing from God. But his word is very important to us, and our words are important to him. He cares about us. We are created in his image, and just talk to him. Don't let a day go by that you don't talk to him. You might find he's listening, and he usually answers us through his word. God bless you. Thanks for listening.